Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Western Liberty Network, and I'd like to welcome you to Western Liberty Network's weekly Saturday training. These training sessions are held every Saturday at 1 o'clock Pacific time and can always be reached through the link and the passcode information provided on the westernlibertynetwork.org website. Western Liberty Network is an organization consisting of myself. Let's see, I'm gonna take care of this here. Just a moment, we've got a technical issue. Okay, Western Liberty Network is an organization consisting of myself, a board of directors, an advisory committee, and numerous volunteer trainers. WLN's purpose is to help activists reweave the fabric of our political culture by empowering them to take control of their own governance. WLN does this by building a farm team of trained local nonpartisan office holders, citizen advocates, and campaign volunteers. WLN trains activists who in turn use their training for the campaigns and causes they care about. If you would like to support Western Liberty Network, you can do so. I'm going to show you a screen. Let's see. Okay, here we go. This is Western Liberty Network's website. If you would like to support Western Liberty Network, go to support WLN. And you can donate a tax-deductible contribution, either a one-time contribution or a monthly contribution. You can also see past trainings by going to the training tab. You can download our various training documents, and you can view the videos of various Saturday training sessions. These are available to you free of charge. And of course, you can see our latest activities here. This is where we'll advertise the next weekly training and other events that Western Liberty Network is taking on. Okay, now one last thing, I have to provide a disclaimer. Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 educational organization. As such, we do not endorse or oppose any political party, any candidate, even the ones we train, ballot measure, or legislation. The statements and other forms of information provided by you, guest presenters, are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Western Liberty Network. In the way of conference etiquette, everyone here has been muted, but you're free to unmute yourself if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. If you want to do that, just unmute yourself and then remute yourself when you're finished. That way we can maximize the quality of the audio and not get echoes and all of that sort of thing. And with that, we'll begin today. The training today is how to be effective in informal debates. If you are a candidate, you may be asked to participate in some formal debates. This training can be useful to you if you're in that situation. But this training is for informal debates or discussions. For example, if you are being interviewed on the radio, or you're being interviewed by a newspaper reporter, or you're just having a discussion with someone in a diner, or if you're debating with your son or daughter about whether or not to loan them the keys to the car for the week. These are all informal debates. How to be successful in informal debates without cheesing off your opponent. And that's a skill that we really need today. Got a few more people coming in. I'd like to welcome everyone to the training. You've come just in time. Now, if you are a candidate for office or you are talking about any issue, the first thing you need to do is identify your audience. This might sometimes seem like an obvious thing, but if you are being interviewed by someone on the radio, maybe a talk show host that you're calling into, or maybe you're being interviewed in studio, or maybe you're being interviewed by a newspaper reporter, think about who your audience is. Your audience is not necessarily the person you're talking to. If you are being interviewed on the radio, your audience are the listeners. I've seen many people try to convince the talk show host of something when what they really need to do is make their point with the people who are listening to the radio show. The same is true with newspapers. I've seen people try to convince the reporter of something when what they really need to do is make sure that they have a quote that'll go out to the readership and convince them. If you are debating somebody in a diner or in a public place, yes, you're talking to that person, but your audience may not be that person. That audience may be others who are listening, people who are checking you out, whatever it is, especially if you get into a conversation on the street about something political when you're trying to gather a signature or whether you're trying to get them to vote for you or whatever it is. So the first thing to do is when you find yourself in a political discussion, identify who your audience is, and then realize that although you may be talking to a particular person, and yes, it would be nice to convince them of whatever you're talking about, or at least make them understand your position, that they are not really your audience. The audience are the people that they will in turn communicate with. This alone will put you at a great advantage compared to other people who are simply trying to convince the person that they are talking to. The second thing is always be nice, no matter what. It doesn't matter how they tick you off. If you get into a debate at a Thanksgiving Day dinner with an uncle or an aunt, I've seen so many people say, "How can you be so stupid? This is such a plain thing. Please, I can't believe I'm talking to you. I can't believe that we have to make this point in the 21st century," whatever it is. This happens a lot. Don't ever do this if you're trying to make a point, especially if you're talking to a legislator, a newspaper reporter, a television reporter, or anything like that. If a lot of times people will side with the person they think is the nice person, the person who is not a jerk. If you come across as a jerk, or if you come across as unprofessional, it doesn't matter how right you are on the points, you're going to alienate people, because most people do not make their decisions based on objective intellectual arguments and their relative merit. Most people make their decisions emotionally, and they tend to side with the person that is most likable, the person that is most relatable. And if your objective is to score points and just walk away feeling validated, sure, go ahead and cheese off your opponent. But if your objective is to convince people who may be your audience, who may not be the person you're talking to, you can never, ever lose your cool. Let the other person lose their cool. Let them call you stupid. Let them call you an idiot. They're going to look like the jerk. Conservatives tend to be very reason-based in how they argue and how they perceive arguments. Most people are not that way. Most people are emotional. It's kind of like if you're trying to buy a car. This one's got good mileage. This one's got good reliability. And the customer says, "Yeah, but I like the red one." I mean, this is how a lot of people are. And so remember, when you're running for office, or you're testifying before a commission, or you're talking to someone on the street, always be nice no matter what. And if they get angry with you, just continue to be nice. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Are there any questions so far on this? Okay. The next thing to remember, and this is related to being nice, is remember that almost always your opponent is not your enemy. Now, we know that there are some people out there who are statists and want power over their fellow man, and they are motivated by things that we might consider evil. Nancy Pelosi might be a person like that. Harry Reid, back when he was in the Senate, could be a person like that. Take your pick. There are people like that who I think are motivated by things that we would consider to be evil. But most of our ideological opponents are not really that way. Most of them are our neighbors. Most of them are people that we might ask to watch our house while we're on vacation. We would watch their house. They mow their lawn. They do their bit. They go to their job. You know, they're not criminals. They're good, upstanding people. They may be wrong. They may be misguided, you know, and we can talk to them about that. But most of them are not really evil. Most of them are just wrong or misguided, or they haven't been given good information, or whatever the reason might be. Most of the people who we find as opponents in informal discussions are not evil. They're just misguided if they are in favor of big government, if they're in favor of statism. Most of them really believe that the things that they support are actually good. And that's different than being evil and just wanting power over your fellow man or woman. And so if you can recognize, if you are in a debate or a discussion with someone who you disagree with, if you can recognize that they may be your opponent, but they're not your enemy, it makes it a lot easier to be nice. And if you are nice, it's going to make you more likable. It's going to make you more credible. Now, interesting, notice that in talking about debates, I've talked about three things so far. One, identify your audience so that you know who you're actually trying to convince. And it may not be the person you're actually talking to. Always be nice, no matter what. No matter, even if you're provoked, even if you're insulted, always be nice, gracious, and effective. Ronald Reagan was well known for being a happy warrior. We have to be happy warriors too. That is what turns people, that is what inspires people. And then remember that your opponent is not your enemy. If you do these three things, you've already gone a long way to winning every debate you are in. I can't guarantee you're going to win every debate that you're in, but this will take you a long way toward that, especially if your audience does not observe these guidelines. Number 4, you don't have to know everything. We are in an era right now where if people are being interviewed, they feel like they have to know something, that they can't just say, I don't know, or whatever it is. You will sometimes be blindsided by a point that you hadn't thought of. You will sometimes be blindsided by a reasonable argument, even if you don't agree with it, on the other side. You may be challenged on a fact that you don't have at hand. If that happens, you've got to think of the long ball. Protect your credibility, protect your honor. And in those sorts of situations, it is okay to say, you know something? I hadn't thought of that before. That's a new take on something. I need to think about that. I'll tell you what, let me think about it and get back to you. There's nothing wrong with that. That does a couple of things. First of all, if you're caught blindsided by something you hadn't thought of before, it gives you some time to think about it and come up with an answer. Another thing it does is it shows your audience, whoever your audience is, that you're not just some kind of hack. It shows them that you listen. It shows them that you think. It shows them that you're thoughtful. And that will enhance your credibility in the long run. Even if you don't have a good answer for one issue at hand, they're not going to think you as just a hack that has no credibility in a future answer. Now, if you do that, if you are in a situation where you can say, you know, I don't know the answer to that question, that's something I hadn't thought about, I'd like to look into that and get back to you. That's fine. But if you do that, make sure that you follow through. Make sure that you follow through, you look into the information, and you get back to them, especially if they're a newspaper reporter or something like that. You will be treated with a lot more credibility down the road if you take that approach, rather than trying to dazzle someone with BS or try to, in some way, cover up the fact that you may not know the answer to a particular question. It's important for the long run to be honest about those sorts of things. Any questions so far? Okay. We'll go to number 5. Look for common ground. Now, by this, I don't mean places where you agree. If you can find places where you agree, that's great. But what I mean by common ground is a common end state. For example, if you're debating education and whether or not there should be school choice in charter schools, you might ask your opponent something like this. Look, I think we both want the same outcome. We want an educational system that prepares our children for the world and makes sure that they're prepared for college if they want to go to college, and that we're able to provide a good education for everyone for a reasonable cost. Do you agree with that? Okay. What are they going to say? No, right? If you're debating something like healthcare, say, I think we both want the same thing. We want the most people possible to get a high quality of healthcare for a reasonable cost. Do you agree? Okay, whatever it is, ask your opponent about the end goal. Once you get them to agree with the end goal, then you've got them. Because then what you can do is do a pivot. This debate tactic is called the Ransberger pivot. The person who documented it was named Ransberger. I don't know anything about the guy, but it's a good topic. So what you do is you say, okay, now that we've agreed on what we want for an outcome, let's look at which system historically has provided the best results. Okay. Then if you know your facts, you've got them. And you'll know you have them when they try to squirm out of it, when they try to say, well, what about equity? Or what about this? What about that? You can say, no, you agreed with me that we want the healthcare system that provides the most people with the best healthcare for the most reasonable price. That's what we agreed to. Okay. Don't try to slither out of it. That's what we agreed to. Okay. And sometimes this is where you get people who get upset. And it becomes a challenge to be nice. Because sometimes when you use a tactic like this, they will start to get upset. And if they get upset, it's perfectly acceptable. You have another person came in. It's perfectly acceptable to say, you know what? I apologize. I didn't want to upset you. I tell you what, let's cool down and let's come back and resume this discussion in a couple of days or a week. How's about that? Okay. Now that discussion may happen, that discussion may not happen, but your audience will see that you are gracious. The audience will see that you kept your cool. That lends credibility to your argument. The audience will see that you care about the feelings of other people, which makes them like you. And people tend to side with people that they like and that they can relate to. And so that's very important. Sometimes, it's jujitsu. Sometimes you win a fight by not fighting. And if they lose their cool, they generally will lose the debate, even if they're stronger on the facts and have done more research than you have. One other thing I would ask you to do if you get involved in informal debates, and again, if you have a comment or a question, please unmute yourself and interrupt me. I'm happy to have this be interactive. When you go into a discussion, whether you're talking about whether you're running for office or whether you're on the radio or anything like that, think about the primary value that you are trying to promote. That value might be something like choice, if it's education, or freedom, if it's with respect to healthcare. Whatever the primary value is, think about what that value is. And then, as you debate, frame the discussion by in terms of that value that you hold. I'll give you an example of what I mean. My favorite example is this. Let's say that you're debating whether or not candy is good. You'll have the person on one side, maybe the president of the Hershey Corporation, We have another person coming in. Okay, maybe you have the president of the Hershey Corporation, and they will say, candy is good because candy promotes happiness. Children love it. They smile. Lovers give candy to each other. It starts romance. It starts wonderful things. Candy is used to celebrate important occasions in life or just to enjoy life itself. Candy promotes happiness, and happiness is the primary value. Happiness is the value you should regard as most important when deciding whether or not candy is good. So that person is trying to frame the debate in terms of happiness and is telling the audience that happiness is the most important value and that that's the value they should use in determining whether candy is good or not. On the other side, you're going to have someone from maybe the American Dental Association. They're going to say, I understand that candy is seductive and it's sweet and people like it, but it is not good. It causes tooth decay, it causes diabetes, it causes obesity, causes heart attacks, all of these things. It is not happiness that should be the primary value. It is health that should be the primary value. And they will try to frame their discussion in terms of health. Likewise, if you are debating education, you might want to frame the debate in terms of freedom or choice. A liberal might want to frame it in terms of equity of outcome or some other similar value. Okay. So when you go into a discussion, this could be something as simple as a discussion within your home. If you have a son or a daughter that wants to borrow the car keys, okay, their argument might be freedom. I want to go do things. I want to go on a date. I want to do whatever, meet people at the arcade, whatever it is. Your value might be safety. I don't know that you're a very good driver yet. You had an accident 2 months ago. Whatever it is, you're going to debate back and forth, but you have to have a central value, and you're going to frame the discussion in terms of what that value is. Does anybody not understand this concept? I don't see any. Yeah, go ahead.
My bandwidth is unstable, so I don't know if I can show.
Who is this? This is Mary? Is this Mary? I don't hear Mary.
Mary lives kind of out in the country, so her bandwidth is very erratic. So I think she was trying to talk, but I don't think it's working.
Okay, well, Mary, if you can hear me, you can also issue a question or a comment through the text window. If you want to type the text, I'll be able to look at it. By the way, I have a file that I'm going to send you. And while Mary is trying to get that working, I'm going to send you this file. Okay, this file okay, here it comes. There it is. I've just sent a file to the chat window. You should be able to download it through the chat window. And what I've sent you is a copy of a companion document that goes with the training on this particular topic. And so I would encourage you to look at it and review it a couple of times after the training today. So I hope that helps. Okay, Mary is still on the call. How effective is humor in an informal debate? Carolyn asks. The answer is very effective. Most people, particularly at the local level, want to relate to people who are similar to themselves. And if you can use humor, it's extremely relatable. As long as it's relevant and as long as it's witty, that's fantastic. Sue to everyone says, Zoom has been unstable for me all day. Well, I can understand that. So hopefully this is working out. I am recording this. If you want to review it later, you can go to the training tab on the www.westernlibertynetwork.org website, and you can review this training then. That's what I have in the chat window so far. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next point. And that is, put your best arguments first. You know, in baseball, they have a lineup card, the order in which people will bat. And they have, you know, somebody bat first, second, third, and then they have a cleanup batter, somebody who's really, really good. And the idea is if you get a couple of people on base, the cleanup batter will hit a home run. Some people try to do that when they're in a debate. They try to say, okay, I'm going to throw out my weak arguments first, but save my best argument for last. What I'm advising people to do is to not do that. Always put your best argument first. And one of the reasons is because you never know how much time people have to listen to what you're talking about. If you're in a conversation in a diner with somebody and there are 3 or 4 people listening, they might have to leave. They may not be able to listen to your whole discussion. You want to make sure that they get their first argument first. If you're on the radio, you want to make sure that people who are listening in their car hear your best argument before they have to park and stop and turn off the radio. It's important that you not, what they call in the press, bury the lead. If you have 3 or 4 good arguments, put your best argument first, your second best argument second, and so on and so forth. Any questions there? Okay. And then finally, no matter where you are or what you're doing or how the debate has gone, thank the person that you've been debating. Thank your opponent for their time. This will be very good for just developing a good reputation. If you are talking on the radio, if you're interviewed as a candidate for local nonpartisan office, say, you know what, before I go, I want to give my website, whatever your website is or whatever you're doing, and I want to thank you very much for your time. The person on the radio interviewing you may or may not appreciate that, but your audience will. Remember to identify your audience. Make sure that you're seen as nice, likable, gracious. A lot of times, if you win or lose the debate does not depend on the facts. Sometimes it does. You've got to have the facts. But sometimes it is about something as simple as the fact that people like you or don't like you. And if you thank people for their time, if they've interviewed you, newspaper reporter, thank them for their time to interview you. If you are debating someone in a diner, or if you're debating someone at another point, or if you're in front of a service club discussing someone, thank them for their time. The graciousness goes a long, long way, even if they don't agree with you. You know, a lot of people voted for Ronald Reagan, even though they didn't agree with him. And they voted for him because he was relatable and he was likable. That's the same thing that happened to Bill Clinton. A lot of people who were in the middle voted for Bill Clinton because he was relatable and they liked him. George Bush, the younger, benefited from that. He seemed to be, you know, very likable. People like that. You know, David Letterman once funded a scholarship for C students. You know, students who were not particularly good academically. They were C students. And a lot of people who are C students, you know, they're likable people. This is politics. You know, policy is important. You've got to have good policies. You've got to be sharp. You've got to be a good communicator, but you've got to be likable. And if you thank your opponent for their attention, even if you didn't come to an agreement, even if it was tense, you will come off looking good. You will come off looking like the gracious one. And what's interesting is none of this has anything to do with an issue. Okay, it's about identifying your audience, always being nice, recognizing that your opponent is not your enemy, recognizing that you do not have to know everything, and it can build your reputation if you acknowledge once in a while that you don't have all the answers. Look for a common outcome and show that your methods of achieving that outcome are the best. Frame the discussion by establishing values. Determine what value you're fighting for. when you're in a debate or a discussion. And then frame your discussion anchored in that value. Put your best arguments first. And then thank your opponent for their attention. Even if it's your son or daughter and you decided not to loan them the keys, thank them. Say, look, I understand, that you feel this way. And I think these discussions are good. So I want to, even though you're not happy with me right now, thank you for your time. If you're having a debate with your wife or your husband, same thing. Fight with love. Be a happy warrior. Be a warrior, but be a happy one. This is something that conservatives sometimes miss. And I know that's something that libertarians miss. Most people think about politics 5 minutes a week. Activists think about it a lot. Some of them, like me, are nerds. We think about it a tremendous amount. But we have to relate to our audience. And our audience is more concerned with their lives than they are about public policy, even though that's not good for them. I always tell people, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. Some people get that. A lot of people don't. A lot of people say, I've got my kids, I've got my business, I'm trying to make my washer and dryer payments. I don't have time for this mess. That's all right. These are the people who will listen to you in a given window, and they will decide to support you and your cause, whether or not based on the facts as much, but whether or not you are credible and whether or not they like you. Okay? It's good to be right on policy. It's good to be right on values. All of that is great. That is what anchors us down. And we will have the people behind us who share our basic values. But the winner and the loser oftentimes is going to be determined by the moderates, the middle. We're going to have our allies, we're going to have our opponents, and then there's going to be the middle, the ones that are in play. And most of the ones who are in play are going to be the ones who decide who they will side with based on who they like, who makes them feel comfortable, and who is relatable to them. And so what I'm trying to show you here is not an academic way to win debates, but a political way to win debates. We're going to try that on another training. I've got another training. I'll give you a couple highlights on it because we're running a little ahead of schedule today. If you are trying to change something, a lot of times people are not organized in their argument. And so what you can do, and this is particularly important if you are a candidate for office and you have a platform for change, is to adopt a plan, meet, need structure in your arguments and your presentation. Okay? There are 4 parts to this. Part 1, you establish a need. Okay? I'll use school choice as an example. The need is that we have a one-size-fits-all education system run by the state, and it does not serve our children well. Okay? That's the first part. You establish a need. The second part is what is academically called the inherent barrier. An inherent barrier is simply something in the present system that prevents the need from being satisfied. Okay? So the need might be, we have a one-size-fits-all educational system that doesn't serve our students well. And the inherent barrier is that we have a public school system that imposes a one-size-fits-all system on our kids. That is the inherent barrier. And so any plan you have has to solve the need and overcome the barrier. So the plan might be school vouchers. Allow the money to follow the children to whatever accredited school they decide to go to. whether it's private, public, parochial, charter, or home. That's the plan. It solves the need because we now have schools that are as diverse as our children are. And it overcomes the inherent barrier because it removes the state as the gatekeeper to choice. And then the fourth part are the advantages. The advantages that are realized through the implementation of your plan. So if you're running for water board, school board, park and rec, fire, whatever it is, or if you're trying to get a bill to pass, you're lobbying for a bill or anything like that, the 4-point plan will work. Establish a need, show a barrier in the present system that prevents it from coming into force, or that prevents the need from being satisfied. Number 3, your plan, and number 4, your advantages. And this is a way to structure almost any debate where you have a plan to solve an existing problem. Are there any questions? I think Christy, I see Rod's thumb up. He's got a question. I can't hear you, Rod. You're gonna have to turn on your mic.
I was just giving you the thumbs up because it's good stuff.
Good, I'm glad that helps. Thank you for that. I like Sue's graphic. She has a picture of her, what I think is her dog. I love that. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
I was just going to say that this is helpful because I'm going to be on a web question and answer interview thing with the Women League of Voters. I think it's on Tuesday. And so this is going to help me kind of solidify my plan.
Excellent, good. I'm glad that's helpful. Anyone else have anything to say?
Yes.
Go ahead. Who is this?
This is Cassie Larson.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
very well. Do you have a question?
Yes, actually, I was wondering, do you have any books that you would recommend to help out with this?
You know, I don't have any books, but I do have an article that I can send you that is very helpful along these lines. Why don't you email me and I will send you a copy of that article. My email address, if you have a pencil handy, is
I do.
okay, rpbcentral@gmail.com. rpbcentral@gmail.com.
Okay, thank
got
you
a-
so much. I appreciate that.
No problem. I've got a real good article that sort of goes into more detail what I've talked about today, and I think it'll be helpful to you.
Well,
Yes,
thank you.
Lori, you have a question? I see your finger up.
Yeah,
It's not the middle
not
finger.
the finger, but I had a relative that worked very closely with the late Reverend Schuler. And Reverend Schuler used to say, find a need and fill it.
Yep. He was the one that did the Crystal Cathedral, wasn't he?
That's correct.
Yeah, I remember him. Yep. Find the need and fill it. That's basically it. You know, but if you don't have an inherent barrier, there's no need for your plan, right? So you've got to find a need, find the barrier, because if there's no barrier preventing your plan from being implemented, then there's no problem, right? So it's important to identify what that barrier is. And then the plan will meet the need, overcome the barrier, and then accrue the advantages that you will cite. Is there anything else? Anyone else have a question or a
Hi,
comment?
Richard. This is Janet Bailey.
Yep, Janet.
Hi, this was very good. I have 3 children that are all married, and I have 11 grandchildren, and I'm involved with politics, and I'm involved with parents' rights in education. So I have a full gamut of personal and political and business. This is so good because it's applicable in every situation. Thank you so much.
It really is. And I have to give credit to one of my great inspirations in life. He's passed away now, but his name was John Bjorklund. And he was my debate teacher at Kearney High School in Nebraska. And I debated in 3 high schools and 2 colleges. But he really grounded me and taught me how to think and how to organize my thinking. So I have to sort of give him a credit on all of this. Anything else from anyone? Okay, well, we'll cut out early today. It's 1:41. This has been a lot of fun. My email address again is rpbcentral@gmail.com. If you saw value in this training, I'd invite you to make a tax-deductible contribution by going to the support tab on the www.westernlibertynetwork.org website, and invite you to come next Saturday and every Saturday at 1 o'clock for a subsequent training. Anything else for the good of the order today?
He sounds like a good trainer.
Okay, well, thank you very much. God bless, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.